There's a big controversy happening in Korea right now around the actress Hayoung and her family. To really understand what's going on and why Koreans are reacting so intensely, I'm going to start with some historical context. Then I'll lay out the facts about her family and explain why Koreans are so upset. At the very end, I'll share my own opinion as well. Hayoung is an up-and-coming actress. You might have seen her in the Netflix shows The Trauma Code, Heroes on Call, and Our Sticky Love. Recently on a variety talk show, she was asked about her family and she said they are 4 generations of doctors. Her great-grandfather, her grandfather, her father, and her older sister are all doctors. She added that her great-grandfather was the first doctor in Korea to open a Western medicine clinic. Before I explain what happened next, here are some historical background. Japan invaded Korea and ruled it as a colony from 1910 to 1945. It was one of the most brutal colonial occupation in modern history. Millions of Korean men were conscripted into forced labor, sent to coal mines, factories, and the front lines of military conflict as Japan pushed further into Asia. Korean women were taken too, forced into sexual slavery run by the Imperial Japanese Army, known as the Comfort Woman System. Historians estimate up to 20,000 women were forced into military brothel this way. Koreans were also subjected to live human experimentation carried out by special units of the Japanese army, whose main objective was developing biological and chemical weapons. There's also the cultural genocide, where colonial authorities aggressively tried to erase Korean identity. They banned the Korean language in schools and public places and destroyed Korean historical books and cultural artifacts. During the occupation, a number of Koreans worked with the colonizers, contributing to Japan's control over Korea, and some actively worked against the Korean independence movement. These traitors are known as 친일파, or pro-Japanese collaborators, and they're the most hated group in Korean history. Their choices didn't just contribute to the suffering of millions for personal gain, many of them built generational wealth that their descendants still live off today. Now let's get back to Hayoung. After what she said about her family, people started digging and figured out that her great-grandfather was An Sang-ho. Here are some documented facts about him and his family. An Sang-ho graduated from a medical school in Tokyo in 1902 and provided medical treatment to the members of the Korean imperial family. His name shows up in the 1916 membership roster for Daejongchinmokhae, a known pro-Japanese collaborationist organization. They worked to spread the colonial policy and suppress the independence movement, with Lee Wan-yong, the most notorious collaborator in Korean history, heavily involved as well. More on him later. An Sang-ho's name also shows up in the 1918 issue of 매일신보, the propaganda newspaper of the colonial government. It profiled An Sang-ho's household as the model example of what colonial propaganda called 일선동화, meaning Japan and Korea becoming one. In the article, he is quoted saying that he doesn't have any Korean clothes, speaks only Japanese at home with his children, and says, "I'm just like a Japanese person, and I'm glad I don't have to associate with Koreans often." An Sang-ho is also listed among the doctors who saved Lee Wan-yong. Lee Wan-yong is considered the worst traitor in Korean history. He was the Korean Empire's last prime minister, the man who signed the annexation treaty that stripped Korea of its sovereignty and handed it to the Japanese Empire. In 1909, an independence fighter named Lee Jae-myung attacked him, leaving him critically wounded. An Sang-ho was one of the doctors who treated him and saved his life. Now let's talk about Hayoung's grandfather, An Bu-ho. He worked at Sorokdo Hospital from 1949 to 1953. Sorokdo is a small island where people with Hansen's disease, commonly known as leprosy, were sent to live in isolation from society. The place is infamous for horrific human rights abuse, including forced labor, forced abortion, and children being taken from their parents. There's no evidence, at least none that surfaced so far, that An Bu-ho personally took part in that abuse. But the timing raises some questions because the years he worked there overlap with what's often called as the darkest period in Sorokdo's history. Now, there are a few reasons why this blew up into such a massive story. First, as I explained earlier, the colonial period was so brutal that anything related to it, especially the word 친일파, the pro-Japanese collaborators, triggers a visceral reaction in Korea. This story also broke right around Gwangbokjeol, or National Liberation Day of Korea, which made Hayoung's comments feel even worse. Second, the response from Hayoung's side was not ideal, to say the least. Her agency's first move was to call the pro-Japanese allegation groundless. Within a day, they had to walk that back and apologize for denying it before actually checking the facts. By then, the damage was done. Denying it first and apologizing second made her look like she had something to hide, even if that wasn't the intent. Then her father gave an interview trying to defend An Sang-ho. He said that he learned a lot about his grandfather through the book 한국의학의 개척자, or the pioneers of Korean medicine. But that book was written by Chung Gu-chung, who is listed in the Korean official dictionary of pro-Japanese collaborators. Citing him to defend An Sang-ho was not great. But what's even worse was that the father used the term 한일 합방 during the interview to describe the annexation. That word implies Korea and Japan merged as equals, which isn't what happened obviously. Koreans should never use that term, and they use words like 한일 강제병합 instead, the phrase that makes clear that Korea's sovereignty was taken by force. Using the softer colonial term is widely seen in Korea as minimizing what actually happened, so that choice of words drew heavy criticism. On top of all that, people found something the father had written years earlier. Back in 2002, he wrote a piece for the 중앙일보 newspaper, formatted as a letter to his oldest daughter, Ha-young's sister, walking through the family's history with obvious affection. One line in particular drew people's attention. The reason I can speak these words to you without hesitation is because time has been kind enough to pass in our favor. That line raised suspicion that he was fully aware and even proud of what his family had done. There's also an example of Ha-young talking about her family's wealth in a way that hasn't aged very well. In a 2025 food variety show, she talked about her family having 5 refrigerators and said that they have so much food that they have to throw some away almost every day. That clip resurfaced right as stories about impoverished descendants of independence fighters were circulating ahead of Liberation Day. There's an old saying in Korea, 독립운동을 하면 3대가 망하고 친일을 하면 3대가 흥한다, which means if you fought for independence, 3 generations fall into ruin, and if you were a collaborator, 3 generations prosper. Koreans have long been bitter about how true that saying feels, and seeing another real-life example with Ha-young's family is exactly what made people so angry. People saying, why is Ha-young being blamed for what her great-grandfather did, don't really understand what's happening here. Aside from a few internet trolls, nobody is criticizing her for her family's sins. Koreans are upset about what she did. You can't choose your family, but you are responsible for your own actions. What hurt people was that she spoke about a family history that caused so much pain and did it so proudly. She said that she didn't know the full story, and it's clear that she was only ever told good things about her family growing up. But she's not a child anymore, she's an adult. If you're gonna go on television and speak proudly about your family's history, the responsibility is on you to actually look into it first. This reminds me of what happened with Kang Dong-won. In a 2007 interview, the superstar actor spoke proudly about her great-grandfather, who turned out to be a pro-Japanese collaborator. He built his wealth with a mining company that directly supported the colonial government and donated money to Japan's war efforts. Kang Dong-won then came out with a very sincere apology, calling what his family did shameful, and promised to study the real history. He also donated 200 million won to a memorial foundation honoring the Korean democracy movement. It took time, but the public holds no resentment towards him today. Ha-young posted her apology this week, and I believe it's sincere. I believe her when she says she'll actually learn from this and take the time to understand the real history. But the people saying that should be the end of it are wrong. Based on what we've seen before, this kind of thing takes time. And ultimately, it's her actions moving forward, not the apology itself, will determine whether people forgive her or not. Comment down below with your thoughts, and I'll see you next time.